Welcome everybody. We're going to give it just 2 minutes to allow people to join the call, and then we're going to get going. So please stand by. So just for those who are joining, we're giving it just a minute for those to join, and then we're going to get going. But welcome. Okay, good morning everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, How to Support Active Travel in Your Community After Lockdown. My name is Peter Mason from Commonplace, and I'll be helping to facilitate today's session. We're really proud to be hosting today some of the most active minds in cycling and walking. COVID-19 has thrown forth some major challenges about how we have been living, how we've been working, and how we are socialising these past few months. Now that we've entered the recovery period, our collective response has turned towards the impacts of that gradual lifting of lockdown. With social distancing on everybody's minds, how do our highways adapt to provide safe streets and roads? This is the central question pretty much on everybody's minds, particularly given the government's announcement that the earmarked $2 billion is to be released, quotes, immediately, with fast-track routes available for local authorities to secure those changes. For active travel advocates in public health, cycling czars, transport planners, engineers, this is the moment we have been waiting for. But do we actually know what people want? Do we have the interventions that we know need to be made, ready to go? And will we be able to sustain those interventions when, if not when, when COVID-19 is defeated? So joining Commonplace today, we've got 3 people who may well just have the answers. We've got Pauline Johnson from Levenshulme and the B-Line, and we'll talk a bit more about Pauline in just a second. Brian Deegan from the Urban Movement, and Mike Sanders from Commonplace. We're going to hear from them each in turn, and just here's a bit of housekeeping for you. So firstly, we're recording this webinar to make it available to everybody afterwards. We are an engagement platform, so expect to be engaged throughout this webinar. For example, here we go. We're going to stick up a poll. Can coronavirus pandemic spur a green recovery? It should be coming on your screens. Yes or no? Or are you unsure? I'm going to go for yes. So there's also a Q&A function, which is just on the bottom of your toolbar. So please do ask away any questions that you might have of any of the panelists during their presentations. We'll take some questions at the end, but we're definitely going to answer all those questions for you in the course of this webinar. And tweet along. The hashtag for today's event is #TheNewCommonplace. And because you've probably liked us, because I suppose, like us, if you have taken significant time out of your day, if you've lost your commute and you're adding a couple more extra hours of work, we're going to commit to ensuring that we end by 10 AM on the dot. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Pauline Johnson. Pauline has led one of the largest community-based campaigns to transform Levenshulme, where she lives, into a filtered neighbourhood along Manchester's B-Line, where the movement of people is prioritised over the movement of cars. She coordinated the community to submit their really ambitious plan to Manchester City Council, and has been building a really diverse team of volunteers ever since. Those plans were originally supposed to be implemented over the summer. Perhaps you can tell us if that's still on track, and how we anticipate that happening. And just very recently won the Charles Mayer Award at the Living Streets, many of whom are on the call actually, the Living Streets National Walking Summit. So, Pauline, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can share yours, and over to you.
Cool. Hi, everyone. my name's Pauline Johnston, and I'm one of the advocates from the Levenshulme Bee Network. I must stress that I'm not the only one. And, it's not a singular effort, and it's very much teamwork and endorsing people's skills in the community, which is kind of the core, one of the core reasons that this has worked. So hopefully I can share some of the insights with you today. I'm going to share my screen now. Everyone can see that, yeah? Cool. So, yeah, our active neighbourhood vision, we a core group of people from Levenshulme with different interests. Some people with interests in placemaking, some people with interests in regeneration, and others with interests in active travel, walking, cycling, and other people that just like to volunteer in the community. Got together in October 2018. But with a seed of an idea and a basic understanding of a pot of money that was available to Greater Manchester. So we took a look at what the criteria was collectively, and we set about creating a vision for Levenshulme, what we'd like to see to improve it with this pot of funding. So from that, we came up with this vision, which was to create Manchester's first fully filtered neighbourhood. And we had a champion in our local councillor, Sidra Noor. And I think one of the key takeaways from planting seeds is to understand that politicians are there and local councillors are there to be our advocates and to speak for us. So giving them an understanding about what people want to see and how it can be delivered requires time and effort, and a set of skills really to get that over, and so that they can do the big sell to other people at the council. So that's essentially what we did. We had a core group of people and a local councillor who could champion our efforts, and that's where the impetus started for the active neighbourhood vision. So from our initial meetings, we set about 5 project areas that we could look at, and you'll see project area 1, which is the one we'll focus on today, is the design and consultation of a filtered neighbourhood. It's not just a filtered neighbourhood, because we realised that we have to do the work with more people in the community to understand what they want. So we need to find a way to get expert support and really understand what a filtered neighbourhood is and how to explain that to other people, other laymen's like myself, who at the start of this process didn't really fully understand it and had to have it explained to me. I knew that I wanted to see a neighbourhood that was safer and healthier, somewhere that people could walk about and kids could cycle. But to get a real deep understanding of it, it required people with a background in transport planning, and also an understanding of what highways engineers' roles are as well, so that we could then go in and negotiate with with people in highways, and try, because many of these people are, they've been in their job for a long time and they do things a certain way, and it's a legal way, but obviously it's more relevant than ever now that the law is changing and guidance is changing as well to make interventions possible. So it's kind of, the time is now to strike, and I think it's heightened in everybody's mind as well. So filtered neighbourhood, project area 1. We've also got all these other project areas which essentially support that vision, and the other most important one is project area 5, getting more of the community involved, which is where I come in. I love where I live. You know, I've really embedded myself into Levenshulme. I'm obviously not a native to Levy, but you know, it's a really great place. It's urban, it's edgy, it's you know, it's got a diverse mix of people, but it's got a lot of people that are hard to reach as well. You know, it's not all flowers and trees and singing and dancing. It's you know, it's got its challenges. So we needed to find a way to engage with more people. And we brought in. So when we were successful with this bid, we made sure that we costed into the bid resource to really engage meaningfully with the community, and we also you know, brought in experts. So we had Sustrans come in and help us to deliver the co-design for the Filtered Neighbourhood project. So we're using their skills, and we're also using Bespoke Transport, who, as you'll see in Project Area 1 there in the slide, he was one of the main people that kind of helped devise the Waltham Forest interventions down there. So you want the best, you find their phone number and you ask them if they want to get involved. So that's what we did, and I would encourage people to pick up the phone and ask those questions as well, because it benefits everybody. So yeah, just a kind of overview about some of the things that we did with our community activation. We you know, over the past year, to get to the point that we're at today, which is, I'll show you in a little bit, the vision map. We've held over 40 events, drop-ins, pop-ups on the high street. We've chapped on doors, and we've been really active. And we've also, one of the key things we've done is to support local people who have got a real passion for this, and you know, would spend all the extra hours that they've got in the day, if they've even got any, to be advocates and hands-on with it, not just kind of tell us what they want, but to actually get involved. So people have been creating community street audits, which is like one of the things we did, where we walked about the neighbourhood with you know, a kind of list of issues that people have and a kind of checklist, so that we could then use that evidence base to support our business case initially. Other people have you know, a lot of knowledge about things like air quality. So, you know, they've already got their plume air quality monitoring. So we use that evidence that people were collecting anyway to support the bid as well. So there's always people that are prepared to put time into these things, but you just need to dig them out. And I think that's probably one of the things I would ask, you know, it's how many people do you already know in your community? And if you don't know them, who do you know that might know them? You know, it's a kind of network of, you know, spreading your wings and spreading it out there, so you can get to as many people as possible. And being brave as well. You know, if you don't know people and you are an advocate of active travel or transport, it's appealing to what matters to them in their place and in their community. So, for example, we did a pop-up at the mosques after chapping on and introducing ourselves. And you know, I've got to admit, I was a bit cagey about it, because you know, I didn't know what to expect. But when I chapped on the door, but they welcomed me with open arms, and you know, it's they invited us to Friday prayers in the male section of the mosque. You know, they complained heavily about the traffic on the road. There was over 150 people that day, and we were inundated with the usual complaints that they would get, that you normally see at these active travel forums, which it really doesn't look like the same audience as a mosque. So it turns out people have the same issues, and I think that's really important to remember. Yeah, this was another thing we did. We, with the council, we drew up a little postcard to people, and we sent that out to 9,000 households. It was really quick and easy and simple, but it gave us the basis for finding out what people liked and didn't like about their particular streets. We also put this on Commonplace, which was really important because over half of the people that responded did it online, and the other half we used Commonplace to upload the manual surveys so that we could gather all the data and it would be in one place, which was magic, because again that's an evidence as to what people like, don't like, and what they want to change. So when we come to change things in the neighbourhood, we can go back and say, oh, you said this and you said that, and you said, you wanted more trees on the street, and you didn't want people parking there, so we've put a filter in place and there's some trees on it, so there you go. Yeah. So yeah, our filtered neighbourhoods plans are in place. We are good to go with this after a really long time of planning it, and we're about to showcase it to the community. We have 30 filters in total. 3 of those are bus gates. This is all technical language that I've learned myself, but I think it's if you're interested in activation of one of these things, it's really good to try and understand the jargon, because again, with people like highways engineers, you need to talk the language a little bit, or at least know someone that does. So yeah, we've got 27 filters going in July. They'll be temporary first and foremost, and the poor engineers, wrap it up. Poor engineers at the moment are drawing up 27 different traffic orders to get them in place. So finally, to wrap it up, that was a snapshot of social distancing and speeding. Everyone can do this. It's just finding out what people are having issues with currently. We don't need to do that. And finally, I thought I'd give you a bit of a reveal today about, this is one of the quarters of our vision map. So this is what it looks like, and we'll be releasing the rest today on Commonplace for people to have a look at. Yeah, so thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions?
That's my fault, not coming off of mute quickly enough. Pauline, thank you very, very much.
Sorry.
No, don't worry at all. No, that's great, fantastic. What we're going to do now is we're going to pop up another poll. So following that, do you think that you've got strong advocates and critical mass in your community to make active travel changes permanent? What do you think? Do you think, yes, you've got strong support, but you need ideas, or have you got ideas, but you need to know if they have support in the community? So I know what I'm going to say. Pauline, thank you very much. We've got some questions rolling in. Please remember that you can tweet live with the event at #TheNewCommonplace, or you can pop a question in the Q&A box. You've got the ability to like the question just like you do on Commonplace. So if you want the question answered towards the end of this session, then please do give it a thumbs up. Next, we're heading over to Brian Deegan. Brian is one of the UK's leading experts in design and walking for walking and cycling. He's a design engineer at the Urban Movement. My notes have just gone away from my screen, but here they are. He was the co-author of the London Cycling Design Standards and the EU Cycling Strategy, and is currently working on design guidance with Greater Manchester. He's pioneered the use of light segregation and was involved in the research and trials into lots of things like cycling signal junctions, hold the left, cycle gates, and the gloriously named Cyclops. And he's currently working on the introduction of side road zebras onto UK streets. So, Brian, over to you.
Excellent, thanks. I'll just share the screen and then we can crack on. Introduction. There we go. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to kind of pick up from Pauline really to an extent, but also give a little bit of context of what we do on the engineering side to all this stuff, and my kind of flippant like title there. Why even ask people? We know what to do. It's good stuff. We've got all the manuals. Just crack on and build stuff. Surely. Why even ask these people? And hopefully I'll get to the bottom of that in the next like 10 minutes. And I've referenced there like a paper I did with John Parkin. It's actually based on work I did 20 years ago, which I just realised it made me feel quite old. But it's really our attempt to involve people in the engineering process rather than the usual like think about it, plan it, design it, and then defend it and just wait for the slings and arrows from the actual great British public. We had a problem back in the early 2000s with the cycling schemes we were doing in London on the London Cycle Network. In that everything we did, everybody hated. It was a real problem, and it kind of stopped us spending money and actually building stuff. And after a while, we had to go, maybe we should ask why. Why don't they like it? And I've got a kind of strange background academically in that I've got like a degree in sociology and a master's in engineering. So I kind of tried to reconcile both sides of my brain to go, well, why don't we involve people in the process? And it was completely a new thing in engineering at the time, quite sadly, although most other industries have been quite used to involving people in it, particularly on the medical side of things. So we did this paper. We developed a process called the CRISP process, a cycle route implementation and stakeholder plan. Catchy title, we're good at that in engineering. Basically, the idea was to ride through routes before we came up with ideas and discuss it with people, local residents, councillors, town centre managers, network managers, bus people in there, get them all on site to ride around, look at options, and then discuss them and come up with a kind of prioritised list in there. It was quite revolutionary at the time, and then we took that list in there and we started designing from it. And through that process, I managed to involve like local cycle campaign groups actually in the design process, to the point where in Camden, where I was focused at the time, we were meeting them regularly to talk about all schemes. So it was about involving people, particularly those with a strong interest, actually in the process. That seemed to work quite well. Suddenly, like, people were defending schemes rather than criticising, because they understood why we're doing them, the constraints we're working with, and they'd had a say in it. And that's like a fundamental to this whole approach, and why I like the commonplace ideal, is that you actually involve people in the decision making. So we tried to take some of those lessons learned from London into the Greater Manchester work and kind of pitched a completely collaborative process to Chris Boardman when he first came to see me. And one of those sessions is on the right there, that one we did with Salford, of just doing the planning in a collaborative way, not just like the route inspection. I thought, well, can we do every single stage of the process collaboratively? So let's get in members of the public, let's get local interest group in there, tell them it's not that hard what I do. I like to pretend it is sometimes, but it really isn't if you can just be quite clear about the rules. So we did this whole collaborative planning process in Manchester. There's quite a bit of stuff available on that if you want to hear more, but frankly, it was about involving people. Because frankly, and this is like a question that we all need to ask, and it's still an issue in engineering, how can you make any decisions affecting people's lives without actually asking them? There's schemes that I know of, I won't mention age, but they've been in development for 5-6 years, and nobody that will actually affect even heard about them yet. For me, that's it's almost bordering on criminal. And there's the whole like a risk of like raising expectation among people. You hear that a lot, local authorities. Let's make sure it's all fine. Let's make sure the councillors want it. Let's make sure the modelling's right and the buses are happy in there. Then you get this kind of like a scheme through the process, and then ask the public. And then it's the inconvenience of people saying, well, why are you doing that? I don't want that. Why are you doing this? Well, you've been through so much of the process that it's really hard to wind back on that. For me, that's wrong. You've got to build stuff up in a collaborative way. And it's almost embarrassing to keep saying this after so many years, but it still doesn't happen in engineering. And that's what I like about what Pauline's doing in that process. And I'll just mention a little bit about Commonplace now, and an exercise I do on the Be a Champion course, which I run on in Greater Manchester. And the manual's available at the Urban Movement website if you want to have a look through. One of the exercises I do is based on the Commonplace data, which is an amazing resource, I have to say, not just to plug them in there. One of the things I do is I give people a kind of map of where comments have been logged. In this case, the exercise I use is Black Horse Village in Waltham Forest, which I know a few people on the call will remember. And I use the actual comments people give, and people did actually gave. And then, so you've got geo-referenced comments in there. And the exercise is really to look at the options, potential options that you could do in a low traffic neighbourhood, and match them to the comments and the locations. sounds like really simple in there. But every time I run it, someone goes, well, I want to do a cycle route all the way across there. Great, that's what we want. Cycle network. This is Brian Deegan. And I go, no, who's asked for that? Nobody's asked for it. Why are you doing that? Look at what people actually want. This is their neighborhood. This is where they live. These streets are important to them. Look at what the comments are. And yeah, there's quite a lot of swearing in those comments. Always good to see. But there's some really interesting ones as well. And it's like, well, I would take my kids to school, but there's cars everywhere. We might have a plan for you there. Let's maybe think about a filter, or maybe it's a school street that we need to do in there. And it's exactly as Pauline said, if the things you're actually implementing are based on what people have asked for, then you're on good grounds. If we don't, and we've had several examples in London of people trying to put filters in there, and there's been enormous community backlash. I could tell you horror stories, but I won't now because it's too early in the morning. But yes, if we can involve people in that, and it's coming from the community, then you can justify it all the way through the process. For me, this is crucial. We'll never get any of this stuff done unless we involve people and we take them with them. That's a fundamental point. I'll probably mention that a few more times before the end. So yeah, in the guidance of putting the Be a Champion one, I basically said, if you haven't involved people, it's not a low traffic neighbourhood. A bit like I said back in the day with the CRISP process, unless there was a member of the public there, the process wasn't done. And I would make consultants rethink it, send questionnaires out, get people in there. Unless there's some kind of community involvement, these things don't work. And you're not really on a good footing going forward as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, it's only a low traffic neighbourhood, or an active neighbourhood, or a filtered neighbourhood, or a livable neighbourhood, whatever you want to call it. It's usually got that neighbourhood word in there. That means you've got to actually speak to the neighbours and the people in there. They've got to want these things. So we'll talk a little bit about the practice in there, and it's great to see that being used in 11 June. I'll be reference Pauling a few more times. So let's move on. Let's move on to the data and the current crisis that we're in. I really want to focus on this somewhat. And the picture we've shown now is of Deansgate in Manchester that's been closed. And really the title there is the need for data during the crisis. Now, Deansgate was operating fully, and then lots of pictures appeared on social media going, look how narrow the footways are, look how many people are there, they can't adequately social distance in there. And for me, that was a great spur to the council to actually do something in there. And they have put barriers up there, and it's a completely changed place. And for me, that's what community involvement's around at my side. It's all good me asking, and we have been asking, several of us, for Manchester to close this in there. But when the data comes in and the evidence from the actual people that live and work there, it's so powerful, and it really helps us make the case for making changes that we perhaps like to see. And sometimes we have the theory, like I have a lot of theories and a lot of things we can do, but I don't know where to do them. I don't know why they need to be done. I just know how and what. So I need those other sides from the community in there. So that's a real positive example of data and evidence collected by the community actually leading to a very meaningful change. So if we apply those low traffic neighbourhood principles to the current crisis in there, we'll play a little game now of what kind of solution matches the issue. And that's really the fundamental of my role, and it should be the role of most highway engineers at the moment. What is the issue that's being raised, and what can we do about it? Rather than finding a solution and trying to find somewhere to actually put it, which happens a lot. So we can't social distance while queuing. If you get lots of comments through on your commonplace saying this, they don't have to come up with the solutions. That's our job. Our job is to go, okay, well, maybe we need to take some parking bays out there and extend the footway somewhat so people have space to queue around the shop or the pharmacy or wherever it is that they are struggling to get in there. So the evidence is coming from the people. We've got the commonplace comments. Everybody's saying, how can we social distance? So you can probably hear my family screaming downstairs, but we'll forget about that. What else would I say? Well, the cars are speeding. This has been a real problem in Greater Manchester, where the speeds have gone up quite significantly, and particularly at the moment when people are walking in the middle of the carriageway, so they can effectively get past people, or there might be a car box in the middle of that footway, so they definitely have to walk past them. It's a real issue with cars using the space that's available to kind of speed up there. So cars are speeding in my neighbourhood. What do? We can do some kind of hearts and minds information sciences, stuff that can be done instantly in there, or we could look at actually doing speed limits. But the key point is raise the issue. Let's see how many people it is an issue for, and then we've got a point. And really, it's it's up to each local authority to respond to these issues. In the great inquiry that comes after these events in there, if there's a whole log of issues saying we had this issue here and there was a spate and increase in infections in that area, it's not going to look particularly good on the local authorities, and particularly at the moment where the government stated that they'll come in and actively make changes for us. Very powerful data at the moment. So we can't get to work without public transport. Public transport's down to like a 10% usage at best, and that's in places where there is effective public transport in there. The government's saying get in your cars or walk and cycle. That might be an option in there. So you can't get there. We've got to think if everybody starts switching to cars, our cities can't cope. We won't be able to get anybody through there. We're already at max. If we get to the point where everybody was on public transport, jumps into their cars, then we've got congestion, then we've got poor air quality, and then we could potentially trigger a second lockdown and a second peak, because it's directly linked to the way the effects of the virus hits people in there. So we can put in some segregated temporary lanes. They work, can be done, no real order needed, stick a white line and get some objects in there and we're good to go. So we have solutions for all these options in there. I'll do a couple more. The road is too busy to cross, particularly as the cars start coming back in numbers. Got a little bit of a problem.
Right, start winding up. Yeah, that's all right, buddy.
Oh, yeah. This is like
my
second to last one. Yeah, I'll do go on a bit. So, yeah, if we've got like a crossing of a main road and it's every 400 metres, then everybody's walking 400 metres. They're all gathering in bunches, waiting for the 2 minutes to actually cross. We can put in some new crossings, some temporary crossings in there. Then we can spread that out somewhat. I'll just do one more. So we need to walk in the road to keep a safe distance. Or we can put in some filters, some nice ideas. These can all be done in temporary materials as well as Pauline shown. And finding some kind of like decorative way to encourage people to walk into the carriageway, and also to let cars know to expect people to be in those places. There's some of the responses we can do that. We need to legitimise walking in the carriageway. In Paris, they can put an order, pedestrian priority street in there. We can do it with materials and markings and a bit of creativity. So that's the end of me. Sorry, I overran.
No worries. Thank you very much, Brian. Fantastic. No, really great. And just as we've done before, we're going to stick up a quick flash poll now, picking up on some of the themes that you've raised. So as an organisation, are you more willing now than you were 6 months ago to embrace different ways of engaging the public? And it should be coming up live on your screens now. Yes or no? Brilliant. There you go. I know what I'm going to pick. I'm sure you can imagine. So next up is Mike Saunders. Mike is the CEO and co-founder of Commonplace. He's been a digital pioneer and a serial startup technologist for over 20 years. He has worked in lots of different organisations, from Sony PlayStation right through to Kew Gardens, as well as central government. Mike's been responsible when at Kew for a major citizen science project and became fascinated with the idea of using digital tools in the built environment. And how you can kind of connect people through technology to each other and also to the places that they're in. He co-founded Commonplace as a way to realise his vision, and since Commonplace has grown very, very rapidly. He's a non-executive director of Trinity College London, and he's also on the Speakers Advisory Committee for Public Engagement in Parliament. And he quite literally pays me to say very nice things about him. So, Mike, over to you.
Thank you, Peter. Well paid. And actually, I'm not on the advisory group for Parliament anymore. That was in the past. Thanks, first of all, so much to Brian and Pauline. It's really, really inspiring to be working with both of you and seeing how you're using Commonplace and how you're doing fantastic things in your neighbourhoods. So I'm going to share my screen. Which I hope everybody can see. So hopefully you all know, but just for anybody who doesn't, Commonplace is a digital engagement platform, and our focus is on connecting people to places. And we do that because we want to accelerate positive change. So I think, and you know, as both Pauline and Brian have said, there's an opportunity for something extraordinary to emerge from this COVID-19 crisis that has happened and is still happening, but the recovery that's starting. And I think one of the things that I'm so excited about that it's much more than just digitizing what's previously happened. I think people clearly want to learn more about their neighbourhoods. They want to make connections more to their neighbourhood and to their neighbours. And so I think this is really a moment when everything could change. And I don't think it's just people. I think politicians realise now that there is an imperative. And so what's needed, I think, are active conversations, the kind of conversations that Brian has been talking about that inform this change, that embrace openness and create a shared understanding of the needs that can drive positive change and collaboration. What will the recovery look like? I think it's way too early to say, but one thing that we can map is commonplace conversations that are happening around the country. So this is actually a map of the commonplace conversations that were happening before the COVID crisis happened. And if I just overlay now some of the conversations that have started, they of course include the conversations in Greater Manchester, which I'm going to mention again. But to date, we've got 15 projects, I think, live, and 7 more due to launch in the next few days that are all responses from local councils to the COVID emergency. There are about 28,500 people, I think, have engaged and have made about 32,000 contributions, which are either comments or agreements to comments. And the vast majority of that is in the last week. And this is partly being driven by the free offer that we've decided to make to councils for their COVID emergency response. And we decided to do this because I guess at the heart of our DNA is empowering these conversations, and we could see that they were desperately needed. So we wanted to make the barrier to starting them much lower. So what do these active conversations look like, and how can they help? Well, I think technology has a really interesting role to play here. I don't think it's a solution. I think it's more like a tonic. It's part of the solution, but it has to work alongside many other things. And I guess there are 3 observations I'd like to share with you that underpin the commonplace philosophy and the way that we work. First of all, embracing open. I think this is a game changer. By being completely open about the way that engagement works, there's an opportunity to generate trust in a way that I don't think we've ever seen before at scale. It's why so many people have commented on Lewisham's route suggester, which is the heat map that you can see there. And these heat maps are really simple to use. We've deliberately made them super simple. If you haven't used one before, you put a pin in the map and you say what you feel, how that location is working and how it could be improved. It's all about lowering the barriers to participation for us. So through this openness, you can create a shared collective understanding of needs. And with that as the basis, we can accelerate collaboration and therefore accelerate improvements to places. So let's look at these in a little bit more detail. Technology is fantastic at being open with information. It's one of the things that it does best. And what do I mean by that? Well, simply that people can read other people's comments. It creates this kind of sense of social proof, which is a massive driver for digital engagement. It's essentially how social media works. So by demonstrating lots of other people who are, in the same area are using it, you create a kind of de facto reason for others to use it. So it creates an engagement spur. And this allows you to engage outside the bubble, which I think is fantastically important, and it is exactly what Pauline was talking about. So as I mentioned, as well as Levenshume, a number of other districts in Greater Manchester are using Commonplace as part of their COVID-19 response, which is really exciting. They're using primarily Commonplace to understand how social distancing can work alongside encouraging more cycling and walking. We're delighted to have been able to respond really quickly and get these sites launched and generate a really fantastic response. So in under 2 weeks, 10,000 people, 2,500 comments, and 8,500 agreements with other comments. And I saw a question that somebody had posted up as we were going, I think in Brian's talk, about, that these things need to happen quickly. We don't have time at the moment to do a long drawn out consultation. And what I say in response to that is you can actually launch these things in a matter of days. You can get a fantastic amount of data in a week, and all of that can actually inform the decisions that you make and base them on data that you have directly from the residents and local businesses. So another example which I'm really proud of is the way that the Liverpool City region has launched Commonplace. And this is a slightly different application. It's using an issues map to track problems that key workers have with getting to work. And one useful feature that they've used, as you can see at the top on the right-hand side here, that you can, if you want to, reply directly to people's comments, which you can see that the authority has done here. So once you've got this data, you can start to create a shared understanding. I've mentioned it a couple of times. And this is a collective view based on all the data. It's exactly the kind of stuff that Brian was showing you earlier. It involves a lot of data, and one of the ways of sort of summarizing this data and making it usable is through infographics. But we also have a dashboard, and this provides a readout in real time of the things that people are talking about, the kind of trends that are coming up in the conversation. So we provide lots of different ways to try and help you make sense of the information. I wanted to mention Leeds. It's another city that's using Commonplace. They've actually been using it for a number of years and have generated a citywide conversation that brings together about 20 different sort of local neighbourhood schemes. You can see one of the other features in the top right, which is the before and after swipes. This is a very visual way of sort of communicating changes that might be happening as part of this journey. But they've recently launched their COVID-19 social distancing engagement, and in less than a week they've had just over 11,000 contributions. And I think this is a really interesting example of how joining up conversations and in this case re-engaging a community that had already been engaged and had been involved in a trusted conversation is very easy to do that very quickly. A slightly different example, this is Catford, South East London, a town centre regeneration project. This conversation has been going for about 2.5 years, and it's fed into the design process. But the thing I really wanted to show you here was the infographics which are being used, which are a great way of summarising this collective understanding. And finally, once you've got this collective understanding, how do you use it to accelerate collaboration? Digital has a role to play in helping to bring people on a journey. People sometimes, not always, start from a position of resistance, but when they are listened to, when they participate, and when they're given a voice, they can become constructive collaborators. So a couple of other interesting favourite projects where there's been some brilliant active collaboration. Active Perth, one of our valued partners, Sustrans, uses Commonplace a lot in Scotland. And in the Perth neighbourhood, they worked very closely with the community to prioritise space and routes for active travel. And they've created a set of ground up and quite inspiring designs, I think, which have generated huge interest and some very, very innovative thinking. And finally, Waltham Forest. So I think both Pauline and Brian mentioned Waltham Forest. It's it's an iconic program. It was one of the first in terms of delivering transformational change, and we were very, very lucky that Waltham Forest used Commonplace. We helped them to generate participation on a massive scale, which has helped them to speed approvals, to use some of the evidence to defend judicial reviews, and ultimately to deliver their set of schemes much more quickly. And the scheme itself, as you probably most of you know, has been shown, some research conducted by King's College has indicated that improved air quality directly from the project will create 42,000 extra years of human life, just as a direct result of the project. So if we're talking about collaboration, one of the most pleasing aspects, I think, of this project is not only that people collaborated in the whole process, but actually that collaboration is now fed through, and there's people who are engaged in volunteering to help maintain some of these new public spaces. So, a whole journey right from the very, very early stages through to the spaces being used. So we think, as I said at the beginning, that this is a moment when things really can change. We're very excited about it. We really, really want to collaborate. And we think that through this, the recovery from this painful disaster, there's an opportunity to create a new way of involving communities, a new way of getting around in active travel, and a new way of living. So do join us. The hashtag, as Peter mentioned there, and we'd love to hear your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. And the final poll that we're going to quickly flash up onto your screen now. Here it comes. How likely are you to make use of digital consultation tools to understand walking and cycling requirements? There you go. So we're going to go to the question and answer session right now. Pauline has been busy answering some of your questions already in the chat box, so you can take a look at some of those answers now. But I'm going to throw a few open. So the top-rated one that we've still got left, let's go for it. So as a local civic society in London, we're struggling to raise our local authorities' ambition and willingness to collaborate with local communities. How can we do this best? So maybe, Pauline, do you have any observations perhaps about, and Brian too, about how we get local authorities and perhaps what's going through their minds in the context of some of these big conversations around change? Pauline?
In the context of the current situation with COVID, I think my experience when looking at the potential to bring our trial forward for the active neighbourhood has been that our local authority, Manchester City Council, are incredibly stretched. They are working, to meet those demands and also put the regular work to the side a little bit as well, and it's just, the capacity just isn't really there, and that's not an excuse, and for them. I'm not excusing them not delivering quickly enough, but contractors and all the issues in place, it's just difficult. It's not impossible though, so it's just trying to find ways and means to understand the guidance and get emergency measures in place as well. But there's political will and there's ambition there, and there is a pull and tug from different sections of the local authorities. There's people that want it and there's people that don't, for various reasons, and it's trying to find the people that want it and make their voices louder, help support that.
Brian, you've worked in many different local authorities, including the glorious town of Leicester. You can tell where I might be from. What guidance have you got to try and kind of find ways of getting kind of political leaders and senior officers and those in local authorities kind of on board the programme?
Well, I think the main way to sell this really is the efficiency gain. That's really when local authorities are stretched and becoming increasingly more so. If you have to deal with individual emails and letters into the council, find out where they're located, what's the exact issue, send someone down there, try and investigate it. That's all going to take a huge amount of time and resource. Whereas if they're all logged in a GIS system, they're talking about there, and it's that person there, and look, 25 people agree with them. This is all saving you time and effort. So really, that's the way I sell these things to people in there, that you need some kind of platform to deal with customer issues and people complaints of the residents that you represent in there. This is an efficient way of doing it. So that's my view on it. Otherwise we'd do it in the traditional way and we'd be taking ages and we'd say, well, sorry, we don't have time to respond to everything in 21 days. We're in the middle of a crisis in there. So for me, you've got an efficient platform and it helps.
Brilliant. Next question. Let's take one from, where did it go? So far, the majority of successes in reallocating space for COVID-19 have come from major cities. How are small rural market towns like ours, in this case Warwickshire, making changes? How can we influence elected members and councillors to see the benefit of closing roads? Mike, we just want to bring you in terms of that kind of perhaps that urban and rural divide. Are there differences between what urban and rural areas need in terms of engagement? And maybe we'll bring Brian in on that too. Mike?
Yeah, I mean, of course there are differences, and I think sometimes it's harder to get a kind of critical mass in a rural community which is less dense in terms of population. I think it comes partly back to the previous question, which is, you know, in terms of collaborating with local authorities, I think it's partly about capacity and it's partly about willingness. I think the current crisis, and indeed, you know, some of the great work that some leading local authorities are doing, are kind of showing the way and making it easier for other local authorities to buy into that way of working. And then the capacity thing is about, you know, finding the right tools and the right people to do it. You know, obviously one of the things that we try to do is to make it as easy as possible to get these things launched, to get the data and to understand the data, and then to turn that into prioritization and action. So I think kind of putting all of those things together is what I'd suggest. I think there are some examples. I know that Stockport, for example, they've had a very interesting collaboration between the local council and a voluntary group to kick off the conversation in that area. And I think there's some interesting models which are maybe slightly different from the way that people have worked in.
Brian?
Yeah, I'd just add that in order to make London manageable, we kind of divided it into villages, and really the low traffic neighbourhood approach, your kind of mini Holland style, if you will. In Waltham Forest, it's divided into little villages, and really so we can cope with these kind of 1 square kilometre villages. If you've got a 1 square kilometre village where you live, you've already done that process. So really it's designed for that kind of small centre, like deal with the barriers, filter in the areas, remove the rat runs. It's all completely applicable to rural areas as far as I'm concerned. And the difficulty with rural ones is normally the connections to the next town, but you can still make it walkable and cyclable within the villages. So for me, it's very applicable. And I did some work with the Sheffield City region, and we're looking, they've got lots of villages scattered around there. We thought, well, let's do low traffic neighbourhoods in them all. And I'm hoping they're going to push that through.
Brilliant. Right, let's do this one. Many cyclists are also pedestrians. Some pedestrians are also cyclists. Improved facilities for cyclists potentially mean less conflict in pedestrian spaces. And so I think that really picks up that theme about how do we get all people using our road networks, particularly during a time of COVID, engaged and finding that common cause. Pauline, have you got some reflections on that in terms of how you in Levenshulme?
Sorry, I have to confess, my other half just sent me a text about my child and I wasn't listening.
Well, that's completely fine, don't worry.
Sorry.
Many cyclists are also pedestrians. Pedestrians are also cyclists. And
Yeah.
How do we build common cause amongst the various different road users and street users to get them all behind the interventions that are being made?
I mean, for me, I've got a little bit of a background in PR and content writing, and I think one of the glaring things that I've noticed is the words pedestrian and cyclist. You know, the language just needs to change a little bit, and it's people on foot, people on bikes, and it's just hammering that in until there is no cyclist unless it's a sporting term. Common language, shared goals, clean air, air quality. It's massive. Everyone wants clean air, surely, and that's one of the things that can bring people together. People from schools, parents at the school gates, explaining these things, and I think that gets people activated when they start thinking about their children's future.
Definitely. Right, so let's do another. With lots of people getting back into walking, jogging, cycling, do panelists think that this is a good opportunity to understand the steps that they've taken, as in the catalysts, the information sources that they have been looking at for the kind of friction points? And how do we go about finding the people and getting this info? So, Mike, do you want to have a go at that first?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think I'll focus on the kind of finding the people and getting the info bit. So, you know, a digital tool is not by its nature going to get you to everybody. And indeed, you know, although we get large numbers of comments and people, it's still, I think we should admit, a small proportion of the population, and we need to continue to improve the proportion of the population that we are engaging. But what a digital tool can do is provide a kind of a point that you can then engage the community towards from lots and lots of different directions. So, you know, we encourage our customers to use all of the channels that they have available to them, which will be their social media, their email, their partners who have their own channels, sometimes local media. But social media is also really, really a valuable way to generate interest. So, you know, you can use existing social media channels, you can hook into influencers in the area, and you can use paid social media to target specific groups who maybe you haven't managed to reach. So putting all of that together, you can do that very quickly, you can do it very effectively. And the great thing about digital is that you can actually see who you've engaged as you're engaging them. So where you do have gaps, and you know, you will always have gaps, you can work out what to do to address those gaps before it's too late, you know, early in the process. So I think it's, as I say, it's a tool, it's not the entire solution, but using digital engagement can really help to get that reach and to get that engagement at scale.
Fantastic. Does everybody, Brian or Pauline, did you want to hop in on that one? Brian?
Yeah, I kind of sense the start of the question was a little bit about the opportunity to new people doing it. And I just wanted to reference one of the theories that we tried to test in the mini Hollands, and that was like a transport modelling theory called the Big Shock theory, like Williamson and Ortazar, if you want to look that up, people, for the rest of the day. But that was the idea that a big shock happens in the system when people find more efficient ways of travelling and going about doing things. We're definitely in the middle of a big shock here. And certainly the big shock in Waltham Forest was like the first village. Well, like, let's close things off and see what people do. And yes, it caused a certain amount of friction, but then people started thinking, oh, my area is quite nice, and actually it's quite easy to walk around. Look, they're doing something for cycling in there. So I'm hoping this is like the ultimate test of big shock theory, and people will start considering, actually, it's only 20 minutes to ride. Who knew? That takes me 45 minutes in the car. I can do that in a bike quite easily, and I don't have to worry about storing my car at the other end and paying for it. So I'm hoping people will kind of wake up, and that seems to be the effect that's happening across the nation. I know Cycling UK have said that a third of all drivers would quite happily switch to cycling. That's kind of unheard of numbers in there. So I think there is an opportunity there for us to change our ways and be more efficient and get ready for the real emergency coming up, the climate one.
Brilliant, Brian. Thank you so much. And I think that's probably a really interesting point for us to leave on. And there are a number of questions that are kind of in there. We'll answer all of them, and we'll certainly make this webinar available to everybody online. But you know, COVID, if it is anything, is a major shock to not just the national system, but also the global system. And the changes that may well be being made by everybody on this call going forward, we need to think about ways in which we embed them going forward and keep them well beyond the life cycle of COVID-19. So it leaves for me to say thank you to everybody who has participated, to everybody who's logged on. I think we were up 250 participants at one point, so thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much to Pauline Johnston, to Brian Deegan, to Mike Saunders for taking part and sharing some of their ideas about how we do this in the long term. We've been really proud to host this as Commonplace. You can find out more information on us and how you might want to use us in your local communities, both in COVID and beyond, by going to commonplace.is. So thank you so much for being with us, and perhaps we'll see you again sometime soon. Take care and have a great day.